Thank you so much for joining us today. Happy New Year and welcome to the first Ishan S Show episode of 2025. So today's episode takes us to November of 2024. President Trump had just won the presidency again, and he was talking about building his new administration. It's the fun part of a transition, guessing all the people that the president-elect is going to select to be on their team. The conversation mutters around, yada, 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 until it finally flows to the topic of Attorney General. Now, even before he won the election, everyone knew that Donald Trump was going to pick a loyalist to be his Attorney General. Someone who would carry out his wishes, someone who would carry out his commands, someone who would inconspicuously bend the knee and make sure that Trump's wishes were adhered to. But even then, the position of Attorney General is very powerful, and it's a big responsibility. And no matter what the philosophy of the person a president-elect will nominate for this position, they have to be smart. They have to be qualified. They need to know what they're doing, right? Well, you'd be mistaken, like we all were when thinking about Trump's, theory of decision making. It's reported that Trump was not really into the idea of picking someone with appropriate credentials to be his attorney general. Did he find it lame? Did he find it to be too much? I don't quite know the answer. But one of his own advisors put it like this, according to the Bulwark, quote, "None of the attorneys had what Trump wants. Everyone else looked at AG as if they were applying for a judicial appointment. They talked about their vaunted legal theories and constitutional bullshit." Well said, advisor. So then what is it that Trump should do? Well, this was the issue that they were really dealing with on Wednesday of that week. In the morning, that same morning, Trump was on a plane back home to Florida after meeting with President Joe Biden after winning the election. And interestingly, Congressman Matt Gaetz also hopped onto that flight pretty last minute. Maybe he was catching a ride home. What exactly unfolded on that plane is unclear, but what we do know is that Trump's lawyer, Boris Epshteyn, was hard at work trying to convince his boss to consider then Congressman Matt Gaetz to be the Attorney General pick. This is the same Matt Gaetz who you might remember was instrumental in toppling the speakership of Kevin McCarthy, setting the House of Representatives into weeks of chaos, but more notably was previously investigated by the same Department of Justice that Epshteyn wanted him to lead. By the way, Gaetz wasn't even on Trump's list to be Attorney General before that very fateful flight. Now, whatever happened on that flight was miraculous because by the time the plane reached the runway, there was no convincing Trump that Matt Gaetz was not going to be his nominee for Attorney General. Gaetz, as many of you know, was investigated by the Department of Justice and the House Ethics Committee for a whole host of things, including sleeping with a high schooler, using illicit drugs, and quite a few other ethics violations. All the while he was a sitting congressman. We only know of many of these allegations because the House Ethics Committee, very difficult for them, but released a report detailing many of its findings, which you can go find anywhere. Go enlighten yourself. Gaetz also had no background as a government lawyer, really any experience managing a large organization. He was just at most a congressman whose dad was very involved in Florida politics. I'm not trying to insinuate that Matt Gaetz was, the only reason he became a congressman was because of his dad, but I'm sure it didn't hurt. Anyway, the nomination, when it was announced, there was audible gasps heard when in the Republican caucus meeting at Capitol Hill. Republican senators were privately freaking out about having to potentially vote for that guy to be Attorney General. What do we do? Well, There was a lot of backlash and a lot of chaos surrounding that nomination. Didn't matter though, because President-elect Trump, wasn't ready to budge. Every day, I remember, it was as if we learned some new thing about this guy on an hourly basis. Gaetz was so confident, though, and he was also probably overwhelmed by balancing his work in Congress and being a nominee for Attorney General. He was so overwhelmed that he resigned as a member of the House of Representatives. He was ready. He wanted to be Attorney General. But it did look bleak for him every hour. Republican senators were privately organizing a push against the notion of an Attorney General Gaetz, unheard in Trump's world. Trump, though, had to stay very strong and wasn't going to back down. The Gaetz nomination was going to continue until it didn't. Within just 8 days of being nominated, Gaetz withdrew his name from consideration, and just like that, he was no longer the nominee only after completely degrading his own name, making enemies, and embarrassing the president-elect. Now, I mention this whole charade only to highlight the nature of this presidential transition. Matt Gaetz' story is a poster child of what the Trump transition has looked like. It's just chaos. Unvetted, unqualified people about to be given the levers of government. Donald Trump told us that he would install loyalists into the halls of power. There is no surprise there, but the lack of research, the lack of even Googling some of these people has produced quite a few complications. The press is learning about these people, sometimes even introducing stories that the Trump team hadn't even caught wind of. However, that's not even the big issue. There are also complications in even trying to get these men and women through to their jobs through the U.S. Senate. This week is supposed to be confirmation week. Yesterday, Pete Hegseth, Trump's nominee for Secretary of Defense, he has his own complications, was down at Capitol Hill with the Armed Services Committee. But notably, on the eve of these hearings on Monday night, Veterans Affairs nominee Doug Collins and Interior Secretary nominee Doug Burgum had their hearings postponed for no other reason than they did not finish the paperwork required of them to be in the president's cabinet. You'd think that if you're nominated for a position, a notable position in the federal government, you could at least take the time to do the paperwork. No. And it's not, but even more indicative of the pretend land of many of these Republicans lived in is that most of these nominees haven't even completed their background checks. Wow. So just today, yesterday, Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick also had to delay his confirmation hearing for similar reasons. Director of National Intelligence nominee Tulsi Gabbard, who faces her own questions about her qualifications and ethics and fitness to be Intel boss, is also facing delays for somewhat similar reasons. It's all the same charade with many of these nominees. Trump's trying to assemble a team of really chaotic people who in many cases are complicating the process of their own confirmations. The Trump team was very hell-bent on not having the FBI background checks done on his nominees at all. These important posts. Why? Unclear. Maybe the thinking was that if they didn't find dirt, then neither should the FBI. I mean, it takes the research skills of a middle schooler to find 80% of what's out there on these candidates. So what were they trying to hide? Who knows? Whatever it is, Trump ultimately gave the green light to then conduct the background checks. In many senses, this aspect of the transition has been a total shamble. It's just chaos. But covering these individual people and all these is fun. And so that's why I'm going to include a little plug in here for my new series, Meet the Trump Administration. In each episode, I will cover the backgrounds and the careers and more about these specific nominees. I will talk about the new nominee, or maybe by then a cabinet member. I'm really excited about this project, and I want to introduce you to all the new people. So I hope you tune in. New episodes start every Tuesday, and starting next Tuesday, and they come out on YouTube, followed by your preferred podcasting platform the week after. But anyway, beyond Trump's team, though there's a whole shady aspect of that, there's also another shady aspect to this transition, and that is the committee making all of this happen. So presidential transitions cost a lot of money, and that money comes from the government, but also from private donations. This is a relatively new thing for us to focus on, mainly because most people don't care. That was until this transition. President-elect Trump and his groups have managed to raise $200 million for his inaugural fund. That's the most of any president-elect ever. You might be wondering why that's even a big deal. Why does it matter that he raised $200 million? It's mainly because of where the money is coming from. It's a lot coming from big tech. And that's not like conspiracy or hearsay. It's through their own admission. $1 million from Amazon, $1 million from Facebook, $1 million from Google, and the list goes on. And yes, I know people are going to say that these companies often do donate every time there's an inauguration. Yes, but unique to this time is the fact that many of these companies are nervous about a Trump presidency. They don't want to have to, face the consequences for making decisions that he doesn't like. That would be catastrophic for them. Many of them are trying to curry favor with the president. And in my personal book, no one has done that more than Meta or Facebook. You could really see the transformation of Mark Zuckerberg to a MAGA bro, who you might be familiar with. And you might be familiar with the company's decision earlier this week to remove tampons from all men's bathrooms, an issue regularly and passionately fought hard by the hard right in their fight against trans Americans. They also have discussed removing fact checkers, in their words, quote, dramatically to reduce censorship. But this would allow for a slew of problematic lines and phrases to be used on that app. You can look up what those are. That's to say that while on one hand, this transition is demonstrated to be a PR disaster, on the other hand, this is a really subtle influence campaign / reaction to fear from big tech. They are really trying to get Trump on their side. And the most notable example is the sitting co-chairman of DOGE, or the Department of Government Efficiency, a big tech nerd and the richest man on earth, Elon Musk, who has been touted as, quote, prime minister, who was actually included in Trump's Election Day family photo, one that didn't even include Trump's own wife. As we switch into a new presidency next week, we are going to turn back to a time when there wasn't a single day when there wasn't a crazy headline to cover. I hope to cover this administration, and I hope you'll join us along as we look at every one of these stories. And I hope you join us here at the Ishan S. Show. I hope you'll join me for our next episode, which is on Saturday, which, if pending no chaotic stories, will be a look at the Biden presidency. We'll see you then. Thanks for joining us. Thank you so much for tuning into the Ishan S. Show today. If you liked my commentary, then go ahead and subscribe to our YouTube channel or follow us on whatever podcasting platform you are getting your podcasts on. If you haven't already, go ahead and follow us on social media so that you never miss a headline or updates about the show. And share this episode and all your other favorite Ishan S. Show content with your friends and family. It's the best way to help this show get around and grow. And don't forget to check out theishansshow.com for all things the Ishan S. Show. Thank you so much for joining us today. We'll see you in the next episode. Bye.